Hello ENV 118, I am Joshua Maloney, the supplemental instructor for Professor Etter's Intro to Environmental Science. In this short video, I will be going over the lab manual and how we can use it for class experiments we complete, or class experiments we complete virtually. We will use the scientific method in all of these labs, but not every lab requires you to complete an experiment. These topics include energy lab simulators and researching through online databases. Other labs may ask you to conduct a simple experiment or make observations about a particular site or area. Regardless of whether we are running an experiment ourselves or viewing an investigation that someone else has done, we fill out the same lab report. The lab manual can be found on the Moodle page. It contains all of the class's labs and some introductory information about the lab processes, including directions for writing a laboratory report. All of the labs in the manual follow the lab report format shown in the beginning. Instead of going over another lab specifically, I decided to teach this process by investigating a topic that I am interested in and reporting on it via the lab report process. As I would for any lab, I'm going to follow the directions for writing a lab report at the beginning of the manual. Every report needs a title, your name, and the date. The phenomena that I will be investigating is the Mentos and Diet Coke experiment. I will conduct an actual experiment and report on an experiment I viewed virtually to show that this can be done for both processes. First, I will report on the actual experiment I completed. I titled my lab report Mentos and Diet Coke, and I provided the materials I became familiar with before I finished the lab. I titled my lab report Mentos and Diet Coke. Under background, I provided the materials I became familiar with before I finished the lab. This includes a web page from the American Chemical Society introducing this simple home experiment. The objective is a brief sentence saying what the procedure is meant to accomplish. In the manual, there are often highlighted hints that serve as Professor Etter speaking directly to you. A hypothesis is an educated guess about what you expect to find. It should be simple and directly related to the experiment. I often like to craft a hypothesis that is easy to disprove. A hypothesis does not need to be correct, but it does need to be testable. For my hypothesis, I stated that it was expected that if Mentos were added to a bottle of Coke, then there would be no noticeable reaction. I like this statement because it is very easy to disprove. If there is any reaction observed, then the hypothesis is not supported. The hypothesis should focus on the main purpose of the objective and state the expected conclusion. The wording needs to be, "It was expected," or it needs to be an if-then statement. Under Materials, list the materials and equipment used. For this experiment, I listed goggles, Mentos, Diet Coke, scissors, and tape. The procedure is either an outline or paragraph describing the process. These can be step-by-step instructions like a recipe, and this is not where we place our results. For this experiment, I listed the website I used first and then copied their method into my procedure. Results is the only place where we place data and calculations in the lab report. Photographs, tables, or charts can help us show our results. Some of these could be as simple as taking a photo with your smartphone or adding a chart with your observations. This is when I completed my experiment, and here we go. Wow! There was a very noticeable reaction when I put the Mentos in the Coke. I was having a lot of fun, so I did it 3 times. Wow! Consistently, bubbles and soda erupted out of the bottle to form a fountain. My results indicated that. The conclusion is in response to your hypothesis, and it needs to answer it. Did the results support the hypothesis? This can be very brief and can often be one sentence. For my conclusion, I stated that the results did not support the hypothesis because bubbles in soda repetitively erupted out of the bottle in a high fountain when the Mentos were added to the bottle of Diet Coke. The discussion is where we can elaborate on our results and their significance. We can talk about the accuracies of the experiment and make suggestions for improvement or additional studies. Also, include the responses to any questions in the lab manual here. I suggested more experiments could determine if Diet Coke and Mentos were the best combination for the maximum effect. So this is the end of my lab report on Diet Coke and Mentos. But if you couldn't conduct this experiment for some reason, as with any experiment in this class, it would be acceptable to find another way to complete it virtually. Virtually completing this lab, my background, objective, and hypothesis stayed the same. My materials list will change because for this, I only use the source at the American Chemical Society's Adventure in Chemistry webpage. My procedure reflects what I did during this lab. And watch the video at the top of the screen to make observations and place them into the results. I can place findings in my results for a virtual lab similarly if we did them ourselves. I still write down the observations I made during the experiment. It is no different than taking notes on an instructor who is conducting an experiment. As with the experiment I conducted at home, this report came to the same conclusion. The results did not support the hypothesis because bubbles in soda erupted out of the bottle in a high fountain when the Mentos were added to the bottle of Diet Coke. I hope that this helps break down some of the information in the lab manual, and that you can apply this information to every lab, including your lab final. Remember to reach out to me, Professor Etter, or the Tutoring Center if you have any questions.